Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 106 of the White Knuckle Podcast, powered by Ozonics. Undetectable, undeniable. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning back into the White Knuckle Podcast, episode number 106. Today we're going to talk some more trail cameras. I am joined by, again, Dr. Clint McCoy. 2 weeks in a row I called you Mr. Clint. Sorry. Dr. Clint McCoy is going to become more of a frequent, not guest, but a co-host on the show. I've asked Clint to help me out a little bit, along with some of the other folks that are on our staff. So with the real estate thing taking off like it has, I just need a little bit of extra help, and Clint seemed like a natural fit. So I know everybody enjoys him when he's on the show, so I thought we'd have him on more often. So with that, let's get the show on the road for the week. Here is Dr. Clint McCoy, myself, Josh, and Caleb. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the White Knuckle Podcast. Tonight, I am joined by my co-host, none other than Dr. Clint McCoy. Clint, what good things are happening in your world tonight?
Well, the mud's all dried up, and lo and behold, it's raining again, so it's going to solve that problem. Yeah. We're loving that right now. My old man's we've been cutting wheat today and hanging trail cameras and sweating it. It was about 100 in the shade, but lo and behold, about sundown, here come the monsoon season started back up again. So that's great. But otherwise, we're good.
Cool. So we had a nice conversation last week about trail cameras, and you were out hanging them today, and we're going to get to that here with our guests in just a minute, but it looks like you may have gotten eyes on the fish.
Yeah, man, I did. I've been chasing this buck, and I use him as an example on some of my social media content. A big old 8-pointer we call Dobie Mick, and he's, 6 or 7 years old, and he's just got a big whale body. That's how he got his name. And I got a photo of him like 3 weeks ago, and I just saw him in the flesh last night, scouting from a distance, and he's large and in charge and looking for chicks, man.
Well,
he's a monster.
Is he? Well, I'm not going to ask you any more questions because that wouldn't be fair. Well, that's cool. It's cool that you put eyes on him. I was coming home from mowing my property that I've got a ways from town here, and there was deer everywhere. But of course, it had just rained and it just stopped. So
yeah.
There was some nice bucks around on the way home. But well, hey, let's get to our show. And our show this week is with a couple guys that I've had on before. They've been, I think, together on once or twice, and singularly at least twice, I think. And that is Josh and Caleb. And if you guys and gals that are listening remember last year, those two guys teamed up and sort of put their resources together to knock out a pretty good season. One of them certainly had a better season than the other. But in terms of inches, but I think they both had a great season. Josh, Caleb, how's it going tonight?
Doing great. How you doing, Jason?
Doing well.
Good.
What's new with you guys? Are trail cameras out? Clint talked about putting trail cameras out. We're going to talk about trail cameras tonight. and I'm just curious to hear what you guys use for a strategy with respect to trail cameras. A lot of folks get in the rut of whether if it's legal, they're putting out mineral or feeding deer, and that. Clint and I talked about that last week. Although that gives you an idea of what's around, it doesn't really give you any intel on how to kill that buck. Wouldn't you agree, Clint? That's sort of what we came up with.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. You got to, everybody likes to get trail camera photos of big, magnificent velvet bucks this time of year, but at the end of the day, you've got usable data or you don't. And if you're not learning something about your target guys, then it's just stuff that makes your imagination go wild. Then if it's over a food source versus over a lick station or whatever, but I think that rings true, Jason.
Right. So that sort of begs the question, or plays right into my question, Caleb or Josh. What is it that you guys hope to learn from your trail cameras? And then when you learn that, what is it that you do with it? And what's your strategy in putting them out?
Okay. You want to take that, Josh, or you want me to take it?
Go ahead.
So I think
Caleb, you have the floor.
Yep. So I think one of the biggest things we learned last year, we got pushed into putting cameras out late because we got permission on a property, that after the season had already begun. It was already October. And like Clint said, either you have usable data or you don't. And what we tried to do up front was minimize pressure and get the best inventory for what was on that farm. Now we had another farm that we had prior to season. We were able to do some preseason scouting on, and we put trail cameras out early on that farm. So we have two different strategies we did last year on two different farms. Now, I also understand that two different farms can require different strategies. A lot of times it's farm specific, but I think last year we had more success on the farm that we got into late because the amount of pressure that was put on was very minimal and was minimized. And you could tell from the amount of daylight photos we had versus the other farm where a lot of what we were catching was, and whether it was from pressure or, other extenuating circumstances that, are out of our control, but a lot of our photos were at night. So I think, this year, and I get excited about it, and so does Josh. But I think taking a step back and kind of minimizing the pressure on our properties as much as we possibly can without putting trail cameras out early season. We like to do a lot of glassing and a lot of stuff with as much distance as we can and try and go in more towards season and try and start pinpointing where mature bucks are at.
Got it.
Well, and like Caleb said, that one farm that we had permission on, before season started, we were chomping at the bit to get cameras out. So we got them hung about this time last year. And, had 3 or 4 camera card pulls before season and never really had anything on there. So that entire farm is in corn. I think crop, that's one thing I feel like I learned a lot was crop a lot to do with what you're going to pick up on camera. Because we had cameras like on a pond and other spots where you would just expect every deer in the area to come through within a week's time. But I think that has a lot to do with it. And then, like Caleb said, every farm is different. So like learning your farm's DNA, because the farm where I shot my gun buck, which my parents own, my dad puts cameras up about, me and my dad put cameras up about this time every year. And that farm is very unique because I feel like a lot of times, especially around here, what you get in July, August, even early September, maybe not necessarily what you're going to see in October and November on that farm. After that velvet peel, you always hear about guys talking about the shift. Well, on my dad's place, I feel like it's very opposite. It seems like every time we get a nice buck early in velvet, it seems like we kill that buck. I can think of about a half a dozen bucks that's happened that we've gotten in velvet and have killed that year. So it's learning what's going on too there. So I felt like on the one farm we wasted a lot of time last year running cameras. So I feel like maybe we wait till late July, enough time to get a card pull before season starts here in Wisconsin in mid-September, but not spend 2 months doing nothing but damage out there.
Clint, what were you going to say?
Hey, yeah, Josh, let me ask you this about, you talked about that farm and then that farm not following the rules of the quote-unquote shift. What do you think drives that?
I don't know if it's just there's a lot of big woods, and I mean it's Southwest Wisconsin, so there's ag, but it's bigger woods than a lot of the surrounding area. I don't know if that's it or what. I haven't been able to pinpoint that, but I can think of 10 times to 1 where we've had a buck in velvet and killed him versus had a buck in velvet and never seen him again.
I think you're right on point with. I think you're right on point with that assessment. There's like, I see the same thing down here in South. We're in East Central Southern Illinois, and there'll be farms that I definitely will see it. I just know it's a quote shift farm where the images of the velvet bucks I'm getting in July and August, some of those guys are not going to be around after velvet peel. But on the inverse of that, I've got a couple farms where it seems like as soon as I'm picking them up in July and August, I definitely will start getting them after velvet peel. And I don't know really what drives that. Is it cover? Is it food source? Is it all the above? Is it pressure? I think it's probably multifactorial, but I feel like identifying that portion is super critical in shifting through your own data and making sense of your own data. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Because I think the deer that are around at Dad's farm there, that they don't seem like 9 times out of 10 they don't shift. That's not a spot where you feel like you're wasting time running cameras in July, because they're going to be, more times than not, they're going to be there, and they're used to once every 2 weeks, a ranger making a lap around the outside of the property. Like I had a picture of that 200-inch buck I shot last year a half hour after my dad checked the camera last year. I mean, he walked right by it. You can't tell me that deer wasn't used to hearing that ranger. I mean, I don't, but there's other deer that sometimes it's personality of the deer, and like you said, it's multifactorial.
So would it be safe to say that we can all agree that every deer has its own personality, but what do you guys think collectively? You guys talked to Clint. I think you said shift farm. Are there farms in all of your opinions that are just predisposed, if you will, to deer shifting? Places. In other words, you're going to get a bunch of them in July and August, and then all of a sudden, poof, they're gone.
Yeah, I absolutely see that with the proximity that we have to the Wabash River and with river stage. A lot of the bucks that we'll see in the summer months, if it dictates their patterns will shift back into the bottoms once water goes down or water elevates. But then when I'm out further on the prairie and I'm on higher ground, those are farms that I definitely don't see that pattern. And I see those guys homebody up in areas like that. I think that maybe has something to do with it.
And for us, I think in our area where there's spots where there's bigger ag fields, I feel like that has more to do with the shift than not. Because, like I said, Dad's, there's more big woods there. It's only about a half hour north of not even where Caleb and I have these other 2 farms, where there's a little bit more bigger ag, and I feel like there's more of a shift that can occur there than where there's big woods.
So
I have a question for you, Josh. I'm sorry, Jason, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, cut me off all you want.
So Josh, my question was, when you guys first bought that farm, because I know you guys have done a lot of habitat improvement along the years since you guys have bought that property. Now, what do you think the percentage, has there been an increase in percentage of velvet bucks that stick around or all year round, or has it pretty much been fairly consistent since you guys have started, or since you started hunting that property?
I think there's been an increase, but a small increase, but there's been an increase in quality and number of mature deer too. I mean, I remember, I was young, but I remember the first couple of years we had that place, the biggest buck we had, and this is almost before digital trail cameras, the ones you had to develop. Like, the biggest one was like a 140-inch 10-pointer. Now, we've had several booners, 2 bucks that were, one for sure was over 200, and another one I'm guessing was over 200. I mean, so the quality of bucks has increased though too. So, I mean, whatever that means.
So do you think it's due to just a change in pressure, or certainly you don't have a magic wand that you wave to change things? So what do you think changed?
Yeah, I think change in pressure, like, we're always learning. I'm always learning. I'm trying to always talk Dad into doing something different, whether he likes it or not. And food, I think the food plot, figuring out our food plot stuff helps too, so, and the herd management too.
So I'm intrigued to find out what happens for all of you guys, and I'll ask Caleb first, and then Josh, and then Clint, if you want to follow up at the end. So you've got your cameras conceivably, and if I'm wrong, just say so. You've got them on food for all, I would say, for all of the summer, most of the summer. Is that a correct statement for all 3 of you? In some cases.
Oh yeah, for the majority of them, yeah.
Clint?
Yeah, me as well. Yeah.
Okay, so you got them on food. The beans turn, brown, and the shooting fish in a barrel, so to speak, with trail cameras on beans in the summer is over. Now what? Caleb?
Personally, so when that shift happens from browsing in bean fields to more foliage in the woods, typically, like last year, they were, and it could have been they had the beans put in late last year. And, I'd be curious to see what it is next year, because it's on a crop rotation. It'll be corn this year, and I'm assuming beans are following. So I'll be curious to see when that shift happens in a year from now. But last year, what had happened was they were feeding on those beans all the way up until scrapes had opened up. Now, even if they're still feeding out in that bean field, the next move that I make is to scrapes. Because unless I've already been in a property like the one that I shot that buck on this year, I have 2 different moves I want to make. I want to make one to scrapes, and I want one in the bedding area of where I believe this buck is bedding. One of our target bucks is bedding. And that one, I'm not going to check at all. I'm going to let it soak through the entire season. In fact, I'll probably get in there prior to that switch. But if that food switches, I'm moving straight to open scrapes.
Josh?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Caleb. Like once we go off the food, like at Dad's, we have a little pond, so we get a lot of deer traffic through there, so we tend to keep a camera on that. Definitely in the early season, we get a lot of pictures, and most of the time we tend to keep a camera there or very close to that most of the year because it just seems like a hot area where we get a lot of pictures. Then we're kind of shifting to scrapes. Most of the time, those, and it's kind of like at Dad's, I know where there's going to be 5 big community scrapes every year. Some of these other farms is learning where those scrapes are going to be at because we've only been hunting those farms a year. So to me, I love a scrape. I love when scrapes open up, especially when we don't really know what we got, because then you can start getting inventory. Like this year is the first year in about 4 years that I'm going to be looking for a new buck to hunt because I killed that buck with my gun last year. So, I mean, I have no idea what's going to be at Dad's. I have some of these other farms that me and Caleb are hunting. We know about 1 or 2 bucks, but really interested to see what else shows up. So, it's going to be the year of finding a couple of shooters.
Clint?
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you guys there too. I tend to when I get that velvet peel shift time in mind, and it's typically around Labor Day is when I start all this. I'm gonna crowd some areas where I know those hub scrapes are, those classic historical year after year, everybody visits them. I'm gonna throw those cameras off of food onto those, just like you guys do, move those cameras over to scrapes. And one of the things I'll do too in areas like that is, if I'm not necessarily going just for inventory, but from deer movement, I'm going to shift some of those cameras, kind of go from the outside in. I'm going to push them inward into some of those transition zones between bed to food, some of those little creek crossing trails. I'll throw some up at that time of year. I'll throw some up in suspected doe bedding areas too, and just let them soak, like you guys mentioned. And it's really dictated based on what I already know on the farm versus what I need to know on the place. And so if I'm just doing strictly inventory and I'm kind of semi-blind still, and I'm trying to re-inventory post-shift, scrapes are a great tactic.
Clint, last week we started to narrow down, or I asked you how it is you start to come up with a strategy. I'm curious to find out, and I'll just let you guys talk about it, because clearly I don't have a strategy. But, well, I do. I just don't know if it's the right one yet, but we'll see. I'm just curious between the three of you to hear what you guys have to say about, let's just say it's September 20th, and you've gotten some consistent pictures in the last 10 days of, a buck you want to target hitting a scrape. For all three of you, what does that mean? What do you do from there? And how is it that you're implementing trail cameras to help you?
Well, I think it depends for me. When that buck is hitting that scrape, because if it's hitting that scrape at 2 or 3 in the morning, it's going to be a lot harder to backtrack that buck. Now, if that buck is hitting it half an hour after dark, or maybe even an hour after dark, or an hour before daylight, I'm going to start backtracking that buck. Okay, so he's moving from this area, or he's moving in this direction, and this is where I perceive him to be bedding. Now, where is he coming from? So I'll start trying to backtrack that buck and see exactly where I believe his travel is.
Okay. Don't be shy.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Like, I like that strategy. Early season, we all like to hunt. We're all ready to get out there. But I'm not going after tiger buck unless I'm pretty confident that, you can get after him. Like if he's getting pictures of him in your food plot at 2 a.m, it's like he could be anywhere during when you could shoot him. So it's all, like Caleb was getting at, I think it's all about timing there on that, on what time you're getting him on the pictures.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with that. Like as far as kind of reverse engineering his travel pattern, so to speak, based off timing of when he's visiting those cameras. In that time of year for me, like toward the tail end of September and first October, in the southern southeastern part of the state that I live in, it's still going to be super darn hot, or can be come October 1st for us as our opener, and it's really hard to catch target bucks up and mobile that time of year for us. But if I've got some daylight intel on him on those last 7 to 10 days of September, I actually may get a little pushy and shovey on him and crowd him a little bit. I feel like those hot days of early October for me let me get away with, I know it sounds backwards, but maybe getting away with crowding him a little tighter. You almost, when it's warm, it seems like you almost have to step on him to make him flee. And the way I look at it is, if I'm not bumping my target buck every now and again, I'm not doing it, of course, on purpose, but if I'm not accidentally bumping a buck here and there, I'm probably not, for my taste, not being aggressive enough in a scenario like that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, because last year, I got really aggressive, got into a bedding area, and it paid off for me. But I think what I took away from that more than anything was that you got to be in the game. And obviously you don't want to make foolish decisions and try and push it when your chances are not that great and it doesn't really make a lot of sense to be in there. But if you legitimately think you have an opportunity to get a shot at that buck, by all means. I mean, you gotta be in there. You gotta be making moves.
What do you guys use as a gauge in terms of getting too close? And maybe a better question is, what is it that you're looking for in order to push the envelope? Are you just picking a trail based on the direction that he's entering the scrape, or how is it that you go about deciding, what to do? Or do you just take 6 trail cameras and put them in a circle on every trail around the scrape?
Unfortunately,
All the above.
Unfortunately, Josh and I don't have the luxury of trail cameras, so that's kind of, it's a tough question, because what is too close? Even bumping them, is that too close, or are you where you need to be, and you just you weren't prepared properly, or there's so many different scenarios that could play out. But I guess a lot of times, Josh and I and maybe, I guess I don't want to speak for Josh, but as far as for my opinions on it is, if the only reason I would hunt over a scrape is if I have daylight photos of that buck on that scrape consistently. So I guess, it's kind of tough. After last year, we did, I did a lot of hunting in bedding areas, and Josh was, he killed that buck really close to, with his bow last year, really close to his bedding area and where that buck was living too. And, it's all trial and error, because, it's tough. You want to pick, obviously you want to be able to pick the right trail that he's going to come down and give you a 10-yard shot. But, it's like anything. What I'm trying to do more than anything is I'm trying to, inch a little bit closer and a little bit closer and get in his core area without sending my thermals or my scent, right into where he's bedding. And so that way I can, travel in and out and do it possibly multiple days in a row and shift around in there, hopefully get eyes on him, and then, be able to make your last move and kill him.
Got it.
I
Okay.
think the big takeaway with scrapes.
Go ahead, guys.
I think the big takeaway with scrapes is it's a great place to get inventory of what's going on and maybe put a piece of the puzzle of the pattern together. But I don't think most times you're putting a camera on a scrape and going to go hunt over that scrape to kill that deer. I mean, like Clint said, quote unquote, you're reverse engineering that to figure out where he's bedding. If he's hitting that scrape half hour after daylight, then you're like, okay, this bedding area is right there. That's probably where he was at. There's this trail here. You're trying to reverse engineer that and cut him off before he's going to that scrape, or just kind of figure out too, like, you got about like 5 scrapes around the perimeter of X property, and you got a camera on each of them, and you can put together, and he's hitting all of them. You can put together the timeline. Okay, maybe then you can figure out, like, to me, it's figuring out where he's bedding and traveling, not necessarily the scrapes he's hitting. I love scrapes for a camera because it gives you the good inventory, but I don't think most times you're putting the camera on a scrape to get a buck on camera on that scrape and kill him on that scrape. I've never killed a buck over a scrape.
Yeah, I think for me in a scenario like this, we were talking about using that inventory. Now we're kind of past that inventory stage, and you kind of know who you're after. And I'll take multiple trips. If I've got some daylight activity over a scrape or a food source, and I feel like I can kind of crowd an early season buck, it's going to really depend on what that cluster of cameras is doing for me as far as the intel, as far as his travel routes to and from said scrape or food source or whatever. But when I go to hunt something like that, it's really not a matter of, for me, my big decision there is not a matter of whether he's here or whether he's not. It's a matter of what in the hell can I get away with, and especially how do I get out without getting, how do I get out? How do I exit without blowing it all to pieces?
Yeah, I like that because, everybody thinks about how do you get in there without blowing him out of there, but you got to think about getting out too. And if you're going to walk out across the trail, he's going to walk across and he smells you an hour later, then everything you did was for nothing because he'll still know you're there.
Oh my God!
I honestly think. Well, I think that the most difficult thing that I've tried to master about deer hunting is my entry and exit, because it's so difficult in this terrain with the thermals and how wind plays a factor, and when and it's all different too when the foliage is off the or when it's on or when it's off, and so that is definitely one of the most difficult aspects of trying to hunt these mature bucks.
I just drive my wheeler right up to the stand. That seems to work pretty well.
Well, there's a lot of old timers around here who do that too and kill a lot of big bucks.
Well, hey, I'm gonna turn it over to Clint and let him ask some questions. He didn't know I was gonna do that, but I just wanna ask one more quick question for any of you who want to answer this. After talking about this now for a couple weeks, there's one reoccurring theme that I feel like I'm picking up on, and I'm wondering if I'm just misreading something or if you guys share the same opinion that I do, and that's that from July 1st, so tomorrow, through August 31st, is it fair to say a lot of what you get is really just hopes and dreams in terms of what information you've gotten out of your trail cameras?
I think so, unless for a fact that, like, I know for a fact that my dad's land, 9 times out of 10, those bucks that we get throughout the summer will stick around, which is against the norm, but everybody's always, you always are excited to get cameras out and start getting pictures too. So, I mean, there's good things in that too.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
I agree 100%. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think, if you go on the average, the majority of farms around here are shift farms. So, it's great. Well, there's two aspects of looking at it as well, because I also understand that some of these farms are shift farms, but here's the deal too. A lot of, like last year on the farm that was in corn, we had a buck on camera early season or in velvet, and we called him Uno. Now that buck shifted after the velvet peel. Now, here's the deal about having a buck like that be on your property and shift is, I don't know where that buck shifted to, but if in theory he could be right over on the neighbors, and he could come across that fence line during the rut. And it's nice to know that there are bucks in the general area, at least, that you may be interested or that you might have an opportunity to see. Now, as far as being able to put the pieces together, that might be just a bonus buck that you get lucky that, comes through a cruising spot. It's not a type of buck that you're probably going to put the pieces together, know where he's living, know exactly what he's doing. But, it's still nice to know, that he's in the area, at least somewhat.
Yeah, Jason, we talked about it, and then what you guys are touching on there, guys, is the fact we touched on last week is my summer velvet photos. It's simple proof of life, plain and simple. You can't kill him if you don't know if he's still alive from last year or if he exists, period. And whether he shifts or whether he doesn't is all part of his personal buck profile, so to speak. But I've got to have positive proof of life that I want to chase that rascal. And that's what summer velvet photos do for me, is it sets up my, everybody calls them their hit list, and that's the truth. It sets up my proof of life list, and whether he shifts and moves or whether he doesn't, you've got, like you said, he may slip back over. Even if he does shift, he may boomerang back through a doe bedding area sometime on your property or what have you. That just knowing that he exists mentally for me is a big player in my strategies all season long.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, and Josh and I know it well, is, we have little kids at home, and a lot of times when you're up all night and your alarm clock goes off at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, it's pretty tough to get up, and a lot of times when you're grinding it out like that, if you didn't know you had anything, out there worth chasing, right, or, you might not get up. So,
Clint, I'm gonna.
Yeah, and I love that term that Clint coined there, that proof of life. That is what, the summer trail cameras are all about, is getting that proof of life. And that's, I'm looking for that for a new buck this year, but last 4 years I was chomping at the bit to come July 1st, get cameras out and get proof of life of that buck. And every year he showed up about a week after we put cameras out, and, you're always looking for that proof of life. And like Caleb touched on, it's hard to, sometimes it's hard to get out there if you don't know. So that's where the cameras really make a big difference.
Yeah, it puts that fire in your belly.
Yeah,
if he's there, you're going to get going.
Absolutely.
Clint, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you ask a couple of questions or share some insight, whatever you want to do. I've got a few more things before we wrap it up, though.
Yeah.
But I'll let you.
So I'll ask both of you guys. One of you touched on one of my preferential. Somebody riding a circus train. It sounds like a merry-go-round. one of the things that you guys
I have to
on
say I'm
was
completely sorry, guys. That was that was Zillow calling. I had a lead, but because you guys are all so important to me, I just decided not to take the lead on probably $1 million property. But that's all right. Don't worry.
Oh,
Keep
yeah, of
go
course.
go
We
on.
appreciate it.
Go on.
so one of you guys touched base on it a while ago, and it's one of my big summer strategies other than trail cameras, and that's long range observation. It's huge for me. If you guys had to pick one or the other, trail cameras or long range observation, which is more important, and what could you not live without?
Long range observation, 100%.
Yeah.
Ever since I started glassing early season, it's made some of the biggest. I've made some of my biggest leaps in understanding information than any trail cam photo would, be able to give me. Seeing how that deer, enters and exits the field, or how they even just interact within the field, or where they're moving, or if you can take into account the wind and what are they feeding on? Are they feeding on the beans, or are they in the alfalfa, or because a lot of times if you get it on the field edges, you can find a good inside corner where they're coming out, let's say, and you watch that buck come out. I mean, you don't know if he's feeding the beans, or if he's hitting alfalfa, or you don't know exactly what he's doing. So I think for me personally, one of the biggest tools I have for putting the pieces together, or just understanding these mature bucks, has been glassing, for sure.
I agree with that. Where we're at, especially like my dad's farm, for example, you're talking about it, but there's no way you can glass any of that ever. And we got another farm that Caleb and I can hunt around here in the driftless area in Wisconsin, and there's no way you could glass any of it. So around here, if you have a farm that you can glass, that's very valuable. But there's a lot of farms that you can't either. And like, it would be more intrusive to glass than it would be to put cameras out and check them once every 2 weeks with the ranger, and they get used to that, type of thing. So I think glassing is more important, but I think there's a lot of important farms to me that you just can't do that on.
Yeah, that's another good point. Is it's very farm specific as well.
Yeah, terrain specific. Yeah, and for me, like once we've got, we've got proof of life in the summer, and then I'm going to start long range recon on a certain buck that I want to know more about. I think that the ability to be able to long range observe a certain piece of property where this buck may be hanging out, the question in my mind with my trail cameras at that time, say midsummer, is can I see it or can I not see it? And if I cannot see it, then I have to crowd it with my cameras. So, with the terrain and the intrusiveness of it all, if I've got an area that I can see, I'll go camera light on it. If I've got an area that I can't see, like where you guys live, and it rolls like a dog's hind leg up there probably, if you can't see it, if you can't visualize it, that's where I'm going to go camera heavy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so when it comes to sorting out your long range observation, how do you guys go about that in the summertime? There's tons of different ways you can do it, whether it's just simply glassing from the truck, or hiking in and glassing from a tripod, or even hanging and glassing. How do you guys approach all that?
So usually, to be honest, most of our long range scouting, glassing, if you will, I mean, we do a little bit from the truck, right at dawn or right at before dark, if we got a good bean field on a property. But a lot of guys do this around here, but the reason we do this is for scouting purposes. We go shining a lot, because
Sure.
The farms that we can glass, there are some big fields on the top of the ridges by the roads that you can glass, but the big bucks aren't going to be out there till after dark. So we'll go and shine it, and we'll be able to see more. There'll be more deer out there than we'd be able to see during the daylight, and it's still low impact because you're just in the truck, and if you don't putz around too long, they don't really pay any attention to you. But I would say, that's a very good, a lot of guys just do it just to do it, but, we go and drive by our properties that we can hunt and do it to scout. I don't know if you want to add anything there to Caleb or.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point too. And not, I understand not every state allows shining, but I think in the early season too, if you have any sort of information about certain bucks, like let's say we go past one of our farms and we know that there's a bedding area just adjacent to the bean field. That buck may be up right before it gets dark, and he's basically still in his bedding area. That's one where, if we're going shining and it's half hour after dark and he's fairly close to that, I can feel fairly confident he probably came out of there or he'll probably end up in there. Now, if it's a property that we have no information about and we're going to run by it, we're shining it, see if we see anything. Well, then I take that information and I say, okay, we got to understand, what is the bedding area situation around that bean field? How far did that buck have to come to get to that bean field? And, obviously then you keep going from there, where, you try and pick your moves and see, maybe hang a camera, just try and reverse engineer it back to, where he's living.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. One of the things that I actually did today, I hung an observatory set for a piece that I need to know more on. And the crop that's there is going to be double crop beans, and it just got drilled into some wheat stubble here in the last couple of days. So I could walk across that, freshly cut bean stubble field pretty easy in the, middle of the day today and throw up a set real quick that I can access properly, without putting any pressure on them. We get a lot of souths and southwests here in the summer, and I'm going to run in there on places like that. And it's definitely an area where I'm camera light because I plan on being able to see a long ways from this tree that I picked. And so here in Illinois, we of course we can't shine, but that long range recon for me out of those like summertime hang sets like that, I don't do it on every place. It just depends solely on what I need to know, on who I need to know it, if that makes any sense. But
yeah, absolutely.
I think it's all very situational, and very specific, per buck that we're after. So, no one likes to hang tree stands at noon on, the dang near the 1st of July when it's 100 degrees. But, again, that we talked about that fire in the belly, like,
Yeah.
if I've got proof of life, let's go, man. Yeah, let's get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's
That's
get
something
it.
that really interests me that I think would be helpful around here, but it gets hard. Like Caleb has mentioned thermals a lot, in these rolling hills, thermals play a big thing. So I'd hate to hang an observatory set, even if it is way off and have any chance of any scent getting anywhere. Because even if you got to walk only 40 yards from where you park the truck, you're still going to, in the summertime, you're still going to start sweating and stuff. So, I really like that idea, but I don't know how much we can apply it to the farms that we hunt too much.
So are you saying that you don't feel that you can long range scout with a pair of good optics just solely because of the terrain features? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying hanging in a set,
Oh,
like Clint was talking about.
gotcha. Okay.
There's a few places where we're just better off staying in the truck, off just parking alongside the road, because there's no trees up alongside the road where we can park, and where we start getting in trees are starting to get in in my opinion, too close for us, because then we're sitting at the top of a ditch where our scent's going to run all the way down to the corner where they're coming out, So it's one of those things where I feel like it's farm specific. Like Clint seems like he's got an awesome situation for it, where I'm having a hard time thinking of where we would have a good situation for that to get away with it. But I like that idea a lot, and I wish I could put it into play, but we haven't really found a place to do that yet.
I got you.
And when I decide to do that, the first question I got to ask myself is, can I do this repeatedly and do no harm? And if the answer is yeah, probably, then I'm going to swing it. And a lot of those long range observed sets that I'll hang, they'll also, sometimes I'll leave them and actually hunt out of them in early season with the hopes that I might catch by accident, one of the guys that's there that I'm after and give me a shot. It's probably not high odds, but it's better odds than not, of course. But let me ask you guys this: when it comes to right, when it comes to do you think when it comes to profiling your target bucks, and this is me personally, I feel like the more years of history I have with him, the more certain that I'm going to find him on this camera or that at this time of year. Do you guys find that?
Yeah.
I think Josh can answer this a little better than I can, because, especially that buck they shot last year, he's got some extended history with that buck. So why don't you kind of take that away and give him your thoughts on that, Josh?
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. That buck I shot last year at Dad's with my gun, he was a very hard buck to figure out. I never don't think I quite had him figured out. I think I got lucky and killed him. But there was a period there where, like, he would show up every year for the last 4 years. We'd get pictures of him as soon as we put cameras out in early July, and we'd get pictures of him throughout the year, probably every 3, 4, 5 days. He'd be on at least one camera. And then for at least 3, probably all 4 years that he was a recognizable buck on our farm, that first week in November, it seemed like he'd be gone. And I don't know if, what I figured out was he was across the road, because I was talking to the neighbor one day, and he said he was explaining this buck that his wife had missed with her bow. And I'm like, that's him. And it was a year before I shot him. And I think he spent that first week in November over there for whatever reason. And it was the same thing this year. And that's why, I had a few early season hunts on him, because he was very daytime active, all parts of the year. And I just missed him the one, I sat in the wrong stand the one night. He got up and he was daylight active, and he walked right past a different stand that I almost sat in, but because we had a trail camera right in front of that stand. But so I hunted him a little bit, and then it got to be like November 4th, so I started hunting some of these other farms. I ended up shooting my bull buck on my father-in-law's place on November 10th. Well, that day, my dad had seen this buck I shot with my gun, just didn't get a shot at him, and then seen him a few other times leading up to the opener of gun season, which was the next Saturday, which is when I shot him. So, it's like he again this year disappeared from about the 31st of October, the 1st of November, until about the 10th. So, I have seen that pattern.
Yeah, I've got one, old Dobie that we're after down here. He is very similar, and I've got multiple years of patterns like that where I know he's going to abandon this core to go into this doe bedding area, or it's crazy. Like, it's almost like clockwork. Over the last 3 years, I've got him on trail camera in this scrubby, junky little, you barely can hunt it reasonably, doe bedding area that's right beside a main road. The very first week in November, he cruises through there in daylight scent checking. And like, I can't decide on him whether I need to just go all in on that strategy and dive into that and just hope for the best during that time of the year in November, or whether I need to just stick to my guns and kind of hunt his quote home core that I know pretty well. It's definitely piling the information up in his profile, the more years and history that we've got with him. And it's almost to the point now where I've got so much information and data on him that it's almost too much. Like, it's almost too hard to sort through. You'll be up there at a dry erase board with markers in different colors and this, that, and the other. And it's like you literally lay awake at night and look at the Onyx maps, like literally.
Yeah, no,
it drives me nuts.
All the year last year. I actually even got so far into trying to figure this buck out last year. Like, I was making pivot tables in Excel and do like
Good
my
Lord.
wife probably. If my wife knew half the crap I did, she'd be like, "You're done."
But we're out. It's over.
Yeah. But no, I mean, like, it consumes you, and it's like you damn near go crazy trying to figure it out. But
that's one thing that is another thing that I learned last year, is not to let myself get overwhelmed, because I think so many deer hunters, and it's so difficult not to let it happen. But I think it's so easy and very common to let all this information, try and understand all of it, and try and put the pieces together, and just to get overwhelmed and to second guess your decisions. And I think there's something to be said about keeping it simple as well, as much as you can.
Sure, I agree with that.
And that's how you killed your buck this year, Caleb. You kept it simple. You thought, okay, we have pictures of this buck here. We've seen him here. We literally had 5 pictures of him, seen him once, and you're like, I'm going to go hang a stand here this morning. Just randomly thought of it and hung a stand, killed him. So, I mean, they're stocking and everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
But back to your point, Clint, about the pattern thing. Like, if I would have kept banging my head against the wall and bow hunting at my dad's that first week in November, I would have never killed the biggest buck I have killed with my bow in my life either, because it hit November 1st. We hadn't had a picture of him in a couple of days, or November 3rd, whatever. I said, screw it, I'm going to go hunt. We got a picture of a really nice buck at my father-in-law's. Caleb was tagged out. I'm like, screw it, I'm going to go hunt there. And hung a stand. Second time I sat there, I killed that buck. So, I mean, I would never kill that buck if I just... And I really wanted to kill that deer at my dad's, but I'm like, from the last 3 years, I know he's probably not going to be here for at least a couple of days. So I'm going to go hunt there at my father-in-law's. And it paid off on both ends.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for telling when to say when on a certain plan. And I'm terrible at it. Like, I'm awful at it. Like, I want to just stick to my guns, and sometimes I just need to take a step back and go, it's not working here. I need to switch it up. And so to your point, I'll just go try something random sometimes. It's not really random, but it's definitely off the cuff sometimes. I'm still targeting said animal on said property that I'd really like to get,
but let's just go do something screwball. Let's just go do something weird and
like
see
fishing.
what happens. Yeah, like fishing. Exactly like fishing,
but different. Oh, you guys
but
weren't
different.
You guys, did anybody read Clint's post today about
No.
the two guys? Clint, you want to fill him in?
Yeah, so I overheard a couple of younger guys, younger than me, talking about the weather and how hot it was, and they just both agreed that it was too hot to go fishing. And I'm like, yeah, it's too hot to go hang a tree stand and trail camera and trim stands and wear yourself to a frazzle when it's almost the 1st of July. But I don't have anybody standing here trying to talk me out of it, so I better go.
Yeah. That's fun.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you guys this. So when it comes to giving up on a plan, right? When do you say when? What's your trigger to go, I need to bail, I need to move, I need to do something different? And it's probably no set answer to that, but when have you had enough?
Well, I think for me personally, I'm not really making a plan unless I have information, like the most recent information to have a plan. Now, if I start making moves on that plan and I still continue to have information that tells me I need to be there, I won't quit. I'll keep going. But, I think if the most recent information through trail cameras or scouting of, long distance glassing or shining or whatever it is, it tells me that I need to back off or go somewhere else. I think that's what, decides it for me.
I agree with that. I like that. Also, too, once you start building the history, that previous year's information too. And like when I say this year, I was hunting that buck in my dad's. Like I wanted to kill him more than anything. More than any buck I've ever seen in my life, because obviously he was huge. But I knew he wasn't. I mean, I had 3 years of pictures, or not of pictures, that he was not there from in the early week in November. So I didn't necessarily break off from that plan of killing that deer. I just thought, I'm just going to take pressure off of Dad's, because my dad's out here hunting. This is the only place he hunts. I'm going to go hunt this other buck. Probably won't kill him, but I'm going to try for a couple of days and then come back. Well, I ended up killing him, but there was more of just kind of taking a break, taking the pressure off, just due to, like Caleb said, most recent information, and then pairing that with information I had from last year and the year before, and it's kind of how I approach that.
Yeah, and I think too, a fresh stand is always the best stand. And I think anytime you can take pressure off of a property, whether, it's a week or, at least a couple days, if not maybe a little more, I think it's always going to be beneficial. Now, unless you have Loctite entry and exit, and you're not getting winded in or out, or getting winded even when you're not there, your scent trail coming in and out. That's another situation where, if you have good information or good reason to be there, you can keep pushing the limit too. But
Yeah, what do you guys think about, like, say when you bump a target buck, and I know I've done it. Say you guys have got one 3 years of history with, and you bumped him, like legit, almost stepped on him, and he's gone. Where do you go from there?
I haven't been in that situation yet, but I can tell you one thing: if I do that like next year, or if I do that in any coming years, I'm hanging a stand right there, and I'm sitting there until I kill him. Or,
yeah,
like you hear guys talking about that. You hear some pretty guys that you hear their name and you hear them talking about doing that strategy, and it's like any other average guy would be like, okay, yeah, dude, whatever. But that guy's saying it's like, I bet that's worth enough to make it worth trying that. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, I think that's, I'm right there in with you too. I mean, if I bump that buck in his bedding area and kind of depending on, what I think he's going to do, where he's at and how my wind, because everything that I do from a tree standpoint of view is dependent on thermals and wind direction. If I feel like I could set up right there and kill that buck there, then I'm going to. Otherwise, I'm going to back out of there and try and figure out where he's leaving it or entering it at and see if I can kill him there.
Yeah, so I bumped a target buck of mine last year in mid-September on just a random Sunday. I got out of the tree and I thought, I kind of want to go to this little ridge top over here just a little and just, give me some in-season data, right? Give me some observations. And I almost stepped on him. And he took off just hauling. Like, it was ridiculous. And
probably scared the crap out of you.
Yeah, it did. And so at first, your first reaction is like, okay, I totally screwed that up and it's over. But I stopped, I shut my phone off, and I literally hung around in there. It sounds backwards. I literally hung around in there for a long time studying it and trying to figure out just what can I do with this if he comes back. And if the answer is nothing, you bail on it. But if the answer is I can get here without him knowing it, I'm going back to the truck and getting the stand and cramming it right down his throat.
Absolutely. I think a lot of guys, if they bump a target buck like that, get down on themselves and just want to get back out of there. I mean, you already did your damage. Take advantage of it. He's not in there, so get around. Exactly. I like that a lot.
You got all day, man. Like, go in there, and if there's business to be done there, do it. Take the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Hell, I even skipped hunting that evening just so I knew I had the time to go back to the truck, get a set, a mobile set, and go cram it right up in there, clear an axis, semi-clear an axis path in and out of there. And I never did get him shot, but I saw him 2 days later from that stand. Like,
yeah,
I didn't get him killed, but I was close enough to make the heart pump.
See, and I think too, that there goes back to the buck's, the buck profile, because some deer are going to tolerate a lot more pressure than other deer will. Now, we have a buck that is on one of these new properties that I swear to God, when he hears our truck coming up the road, he's gone. He does not stick around. I'm sure he's had some, either arrows flung at him or some lead shot at him before, because he does not mess around. Now, there's another buck. I mean, you go up and shine him and watch him for an hour and a half, and he wouldn't care. So, I mean, as long as, if you have good information to know that buck is going to tolerate a little bit of pressure, whether you bumped him in the past and he still hung around in the same area or whatever, I think that also plays a role into it as well.
Yeah.
Well, hey guys, we are on an hour and 6 minutes, so I've taken a ton of your time. I just really want to recap real quick, especially Clint, since we've done this for the last 2 weeks here. Like what I feel like I've taken away from it, and that is, trail cameras are great for getting an idea of what's out there, but you're not really making decisions, if I'm understanding everybody correctly, and I think that I am. You're not really making decisions based off of the information that you're getting now through really the middle of September, and from there, and maybe before it in some cases. In many cases, you're going to move those trail cameras from the food to the scrapes, and that's really where you start to build a game plan, in my opinion, if I'm understanding what you guys are saying correctly. And from there, that game plan is built on, finding what scrape he's using, and then, I'm not sure which one of you said it, but just sort of boxing him in, so to speak, and getting as close as you can until you have a good idea of where he's at, and where he's coming from. And I think all of us know our properties well enough to know, that we know what bedding area he's probably coming from once you get a general idea that you're close to him. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say so. Yep.
See, I was paying attention.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any final thoughts, Caleb?
I guess I do want to also mention that, whether any time of season that it is, I always feel like there's a few rules that, always play a factor into checking trail cameras or hanging trail cameras, and that's always wind direction and time of day. And personally, I really like to check on rainy days. Anytime that you can keep that pressure off the property, or, if it doesn't do you any good to go and set a trail camera adjacent to some bedding when the wind's blowing directly into the bedding. That buck's going to know you're there. And if you can avoid any of that pressure, avoid as much as you possibly can, because, these are wild animals that we're dealing with. But as long as you can try and, do everything in your power to make sure that you put the least amount of pressure on a property, I think you're going to see a lot of benefits from that.
Josh?
I like what Caleb said there. Yeah, limit your pressure, especially this time of year on your cameras, and it's new season. I'm always excited to see what's going on out there, and we're starting to build up. It'll be here before we know it. Appreciate everybody's time.
Hey, Clint?
Yeah, man, I agree. I like talking to you guys. I like talking to other like-minded hunters that hunt different areas of the country than me, because I don't have to deal with all that crazy terrain like you guys have down here, and it gives me, it helps me think outside the box, so to speak. And I really like that part. One real quick thing about, it's not so much of maybe along the same thread of keeping pressure off your trail cameras. The question sometimes I'll ask myself before I go check a summer camera is, what am I going to do with the information today if I get it today? In other words, it doesn't do me any good to run in 2 weeks after I hang a bunch of cameras and pull cards. I'm not going to do anything with that information until mid-September, 1st October. So, I've gotten better over that, over the years at that, patience, right?
Yeah.
I used to just go out there every 2 weeks, and it was stupid. But with cameras nowadays that'll last, 7, 8, 9, 10 months on a set of batteries, you don't have to go check them every 2 weeks like you used to. So if I'm not going to learn something on today's card pull that's going to put wheels in motion and change my strategy, make me go hang a stand, make me go scout this edge or whatever, I'm probably going to leave that sucker and just try, just like you guys said, man, leave your hands off of as best you can, man. Everybody wants those big velvet photos of those giants. We all do. But at the end of the day, they've got a purpose, and that is to help you kill him.
Yep, I like that a lot. And on top of that, I'd say that I forgot to mention is, every farm, I'm a big believer that every farm has its own DNA, and to be successful, you really need to learn that farm's DNA. And
I like that.
What the deer do on that farm.
I'm just going to follow up with, I think all of you are absolutely spot on. I think the one thing that is often overlooked is every farm has its own DNA. Every farm has its own, every geographical area, pocket, whatever you want to call it, has its own tolerances, and until you really understand what those are and are a student of that, at least for those of us who are pretty serious hunters, you're not knowing everything that you need to know in order to make an informed decision. And I think that's as important in many cases as, all the things that we just got done talking about. And that's just studying what it is that makes that particular property tick, and what you can and can't get away with. And I think it's also different for every deer, but by and large, I think every property has, or a geographical area has a DNA, and there's some that are more susceptible to pressure and or receptive rather to pressure, and some that aren't. Would you guys agree?
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. I think for me, like Clint said, back before, he didn't have that patience to, wait a month or 2 months to go pull cameras. But I think the only way you get from point A to point B is by making those mistakes or, doing stuff like that. And I think, the only way to really learn is start pushing boundaries, start doing things. And you know what, if it doesn't work, all right, not going to do that again, and figure something else out. And, I think that's how you learn your property. And I think that's how you learn, buck profiles or, things of that nature. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, there you have it, my conversation with the guys. Thanks again for everybody for listening. Hopefully you took away some nuggets of information that you'll find useful here in the upcoming trail camera season, and then as we go into fall here, and that'll be here before any of us know it. I'll begin to close the show out for today. Again, I just want to remind everyone, Ozonics Hunting is our partner in this endeavor, and if you haven't heard already, I'll say it one more time, or probably many more times, and that is you definitely want to check out their website and keep an eye on what's going on here, especially over the month of July. They're factory ship direct, and the only way you're going to buy an Ozonics is through them at www.ozonics.com. That's all I've got for today. Jason out.